In 2024, the world's two most important ocean shortcuts broke down at the same time. The Panama Canal cut daily transits from 36 to 18 because a reservoir was running dry. The Suez Canal became a war zone as Houthi missiles started hitting container ships. Shippers had to go somewhere. And the somewhere, for the first time in a century, was the bottom of the world. That somewhere has a name: the Drake Passage. 700 miles of open ocean between the southern tip of South America and the Antarctic Peninsula. No locks, no fees, no queues, no missiles. Just the most violent stretch of water on the planet, where three oceans collide with nothing in the way to slow them down. It is the backup route, the route of last resort, and in 2024 it stopped being theoretical. The Drake Passage sits at roughly 56 to 63 degrees south latitude. Between Cape Horn and Chile and the South Shetland Islands off Antarctica, it is about 1,000 kilometers wide, compared to the Panama Canal's 80-kilometer crossing. Ships that transited are not threading a needle. They are crossing an open arena. The passage connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans without any land barrier, which is exactly what makes it so lethal and why it was left alone for most of commercial shipping history. The geography here is a consequence of plate tectonics. Around 30 million years ago, South America and Antarctica separated. That gap opened the door for the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the strongest ocean current on Earth, pushing somewhere between 135 and 173 million cubic meters of water every single second through this choke of ocean. That is more than 100 times the combined flow of every river on Earth. The current runs uninterrupted around the entire planet, and the Drake Passage is where it is squeezed through its narrowest gate. The result is waves that regularly reach 12 meters. In storms, 24 meters. At average wind speeds in the furious 50s and roaring 40s that run through this latitude hit 50 to 60 knots. There are an estimated 800 wrecks at the bottom of the Drake Passage, with roughly 20,000 sailors lost over the centuries. For centuries, this was the only way to get from the Atlantic to the Pacific without crossing land. The Strait of Magellan, the narrow passage just north of Cape Horn, offered some shelter, but it is shallow in critical sections, a maximum draft of about 13.7 meters in its eastern approach, which excludes the world's largest tankers and bulk carriers. So for very large vessels, the Drake was always the only alternative to Panama. It just was not an alternative anyone wanted to use. Then the Panama Canal opened in 1914, and the Drake Passage became a ghost route. A century of commercial shipping history simply went around it. The canal became responsible for about 5% of all global maritime trade and roughly 14% of all U.S. maritime trade. 72% of everything that moved through the canal in fiscal year 2023 was either coming from or going to the United States. About 91% of all U.S. sorghum exports, 29% of U.S. soybean exports, and 18% of U.S. corn exports flowed through it. LNG tankers carrying American natural gas to Asia depended on it. The canal cut the transit time to Japan by more than a week compared to any other route. All of that became unstable in late 2023. The Gatun Lake Reservoir that feeds the canal dropped to its lowest January level ever recorded. The Panama Canal Authority cut daily transits from 36 down to 18 by February 2024. Queues built up. Auction slots for bypassing the queue sold for as much as $4 million per ship. Spot container rates from Asia to the U.S. East Coast jumped over 150%. Roughly 4,000 fewer ships transit in fiscal year 2024 compared to projections. Meanwhile, in the Red Sea, Houthi strikes forced shippers away from the Suez Canal, which saw a 50% drop in traffic by early 2024. For the first time in modern history, both major ocean shortcuts were compromised simultaneously. Carriers started doing the math. The Drake Passage, roughly 8,000 nautical miles to a voyage compared to Panama. It adds up to 10 to 22 extra days of transit. Fuel consumption goes up, insurance goes up, but a $4 million queue bypass fee and an unpredictable wait time changed the equation. In fiscal year 2025, your LNG transits through Panama remained 73% below pre-drought levels. Dry bulk was still 25% below. Carriers had already built the Cape Horn detour into their operational planning. The Drake Passage had been reactivated. Chile and Argentina are the sovereign powers whose territory flanks the passage. Cape Horn is Chilean. The Drake is international waters. Governed under the law of the sea, no country can close it, charge tolls for it, or restrict access to it. That openness is both its advantage and its limitation. There is no infrastructure, no rescue network, no weather shelter, and no guarantee of safe passage. The Antarctic Treaty keeps the southern boundary off, limits to resource exploitation and military use. But the route itself, open to anyone who can handle it. The climate question is the long-term pressure. A 2025 study in geophysical research letters found that if emissions follow a high trajectory pathway, extreme low water events at Panama's Gatun Lake will become twice as common by end of century. The drought of 2023 was not an outlier, it was a preview. Climate models project that rainfall in Panama's wet season will decline while evaporation increases. That means the world's most efficient ocean shortcut will become less reliable on a predictable schedule. So what happens if Panama and Magellan both fail at once, not just partially as in 2024 but completely? The world's largest vessels, the ones too big for Magellan anyway, have exactly one mechanical alternative: the Drake Passage. A route with no ports along the way. No rescue capability. Seas that have claimed 800 ships. A crossing that adds 3 weeks to every voyage. For bulk carriers hauling U.S. soybeans to China, that is 3 weeks of spoilage risk, extra fuel, and financing cost on cargo sitting at sea. For LNG tankers, it reshapes the entire economics of American gas exports to Asia. For container ships, it delays supply chains in ways that compound at every downstream step. The Drake Passage did not become important because someone decided it should be. It became important again because the two things built to replace it started to fail. It is not a choke point in the traditional sense. You cannot blockade it. You cannot charge tolls, you cannot restrict access. It is something more uncomfortable: the void behind the backstop. The route that only appears when everything else has gone wrong. The world spent a century building infrastructure to avoid the Drake Passage. That infrastructure is now more fragile than anyone planned for. The Drake Passage does not threaten trade. It just reminds you what trade looks like without the shortcuts we forgot we built.